Hello, this is Chessometrics. I'm FIDE Master Samuel Weber, and now I would like to show you a very interesting endgame that was played in the German Bundesliga between Grandmaster Luc van Wely from the Netherlands and Levon Aronian, originally from Armenia but now representing the US. So let's have a look at this very nice game. So we have the position in front of us where you have rook and bishop against rook and knight, but there's an exchange offered by white, rook e1. So black has to think about whether to take on e1 or to sidestep with rook d7, for example. And if you just counter material, white is a pawn up. So usually you shouldn't go to an endgame, a pure endgame, when you have a pawn down. You want to create counterplay. But in bishop against knight endgames, there are very important principles once again to note, where you understand who is better and why. And Levon very instructively takes on e1 and assesses this endgame as better for black. Slightly better, probably objectively, but it's already remarkable that black is better with a pawn down. And the factors here, the key factors, are not material, but activity and weaknesses. So white has a thick g pawn, which is weak long term. The c pawn is very weak immediately, and a2 as well, because black can play now bishop f7, which was played in the game. And the knight has no control. This is important. The knight needs control in such endgames against the bishop, and it cannot find a good outpost. Black is always will be able to just protect the f5 square, and the knight cannot have a nice outpost and can also not attack the weaknesses so easily. So this is a very nice position for black. And also the bishop is usually better on two flanks when it can attack some weaknesses. So black is a bit better here, which is remarkable due to the lack of one pawn, but still the activity is in black's side, and also you have more weaknesses that you can attack than the opponent. So he plays the move bishop f7, very nicely attacking the weakness, forcing d5, and now another pawn on the light squares, but as well you weaken the dark squares. So now the king can join, king f8, very nice. And you will see that Levon just wins this endgame by just bringing the king, attacking the weaknesses, and then very nicely playing prophylactical play. This is the first rule of converting an advantage in endgames. You play prophylactical move to stop the opponent's idea. Then the second principle is that you do not rush. You just bring the king, attack the weaknesses. And then the third thing is that you create a second weakness that you can attack, and then the opponent will collapse. And this is just what happens here. White has already too many weaknesses, and black just exploits it very nicely. So he brings the king to e7, bishop g6. Now really nicely prophylactical move against knight f5, because the pawn endgame would be immediately winning, because the king comes and collects the pawns. So white brings the king himself, king d6, very nice move, king g3, king e5. And this is a nice moment. He goes king e5 instead of king c5, because he wants to threaten this route with the king. So white plays f3, because after king f3, I guess there's bishop d3, and it's a kind of a Zugzwang. So he goes f3 to stop king e4, and now another pawn on the light squares. So the bishop can go on harvest later and collect all these pawns. And now, of course, that we created another weakness. We go back, we play first bishop d3 to just dominate him, and then we go back with the king, trying to collect the pawn on c4. Very nicely played. White will try h4, just some counterplay on the king side, but we will just happily take, and now we have a nice structure. The bishop guarding the light squares, firstly taking on c4, king h5. Now once again, king g6 is threatened, so bishop d3, prophylactical play, f4, f5, king g6 is threatened, so bishop h7, very amazing moves, stopping f5, and f5 now does not make sense, because the bishop and the pawn are just holding away the king from entering, and then black can just win on the queen side, also with some Zugzwang method again, because the knight has to protect these two weaknesses. So yeah, black is just winning. And after g5, just trade, king d6, b5, bishop e4, a4, Very nice move a4 now. Usually shouldn't put the pawns on light squares when you have the bishop, but it's a kind of a Zugzwang idea. You just ping the pawn more closer to the promotion square. You will take on d5 and then have the breakthrough with c5, b4. And this is what's going to happen now. Bishop e4 check, king f6. Very nice prophylaxis again. The pawn goes nowhere, and now the breakthrough, final breakthrough is played. And after bishop d5, white resigned, because after something like knight to e3, you can really nicely use what I call the domination position. You dominate the knight and the a-pawn is just promoting here. So this is a very nice finish. I hope I could give you some very nice insights on bishop against knight. The bishop is better on two flanks usually when it can attack some weaknesses, and the knight needs control, which it did not have in this game. And also very nicely played by Levon with the principle of firstly prophylaxis and then exploiting the weaknesses. Don't rush, bring the king. It's a very nicely played endgame, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and just subscribe to our channel and see you in the next videos. Bye bye.